Close your eyes and picture the ancient world. Not an empty stage waiting for our arrival, but a crowded, vibrant, and utterly dangerous planet. A world where the air was sharper, the animals were bigger, and humanity wasn't alone. For the vast majority of human history, we were not the only players in this game. We shared this earth with other kinds of people. This is the world we need to understand. A world that has been completely erased, and with it, the truth of our own story. We've been taught a simple tale. Clumsy, stupid cavemen were replaced by smart, advanced humans like us. It's a satisfying story. It makes us feel like the inevitable winners, but it's a fairy tale. The reality was far more fascinating and far more tragic. Think about it. For over 300,000 years, Neanderthals ruled Europe and Asia. 300,000 years, modern humans, Homo sapiens, have only been around for about a third of that time. They survived multiple ice ages. They hunted massive, terrifying prey like woolly rhinos and cave bears. They were not failures, they were the ultimate survivors. Until we showed up. The evidence paints a picture we never expected. They buried their dead with care, perhaps even with ritual. They made complex tools that required forward planning. They used pigments, maybe for symbolic expression. They weren't just dumb brutes. They had a culture. They had an inner world. They were, in their own way, people. And across the globe, in the vastness of Asia, there were others. The Denisovans, a species we know almost entirely from a single finger bone and a few teeth, but whose genetic story is even more incredible. So what happened? If they were so successful, so resilient, so human, why are we here, and why are they gone? The old idea that we just outcompeted them because we were smarter is too simple. The truth is messier, darker, and has everything to do with what happened when two different kinds of humans who had evolved separately for hundreds of thousands of years finally came face to face. The clash between Homo sapiens and the other human species wasn't a switch that was flipped. It was a slow, complex dance across continents and millennia. A dance of conflict, of coexistence, and, as we'll see, of something much more intimate. To understand the ghost in our genes, we first have to meet the ghosts themselves. Let's clear the deck of a century of bad stereotypes. The Neanderthal wasn't a knuckle-dragging ogre. Science has given us a new portrait. They were shorter than us, but incredibly stocky and muscular build designed to conserve heat in a freezing world. Their large noses humidified cold, dry air. Their big eyes helped them see in the dim light of the northern latitudes. And yes, their brains were, on average, slightly larger than ours. Now, brain size isn't everything. It's about wiring and structure, but it completely destroys the idea that they were unintelligent. They were different. They may have had incredible visual memory and spatial reasoning, making them unparalleled trackers, but their world was likely smaller. Genetic evidence suggests they lived in smaller, more isolated groups. Their technology was effective, but changed very little over hundreds of thousands of years. They were masters of their world, but it was a world with strict borders. Now, enter us, Homo sapiens. We evolved in Africa in a world of social complexity, rapid climate shifts, and fierce competition. This forged us into a different kind of animal. We were the generalists. Our tools were more diverse. Our social networks were wider. We traded resources and ideas over vast distances. We were innovators. When we began our great migration out of Africa around 70,000 years ago, we weren't just exploring. We were a tidal wave of change entering a stable ancient system. Imagine being a Neanderthal. You've survived in your valley for generations. You know every rock, every herd path, every season. Then, a new group arrives. They look almost like you, were different, thinner, taller, with stranger tools and behaviors. They seem to communicate in more complex ways. They move through the landscape differently. What would you think? Fear, curiosity, hostility. The archaeological record is mostly silent on these first encounters, but it must have been a time of unimaginable tension, a slow-burning thriller playing out over centuries. This wasn't a war with a single battle. It was a slow pressure. We competed for the same caves, the same hunting grounds, the same resources. A bad winter, a disease that hit their smaller populations harder, a skirmish lost over a prime carcass by 1,000 cuts. But violence and competition are only one part of the story, because sometimes, when two groups of people meet, the interaction isn't fought with spears. It's bridged by something else entirely. The evidence for this doesn't lie in stone tools or campfire remains. It lies in something far more personal. It lies in us. And it would take a scientific revolution to finally find it. For over a century, the fate of the Neanderthals was a mystery locked in stone and bone. We could only guess. But then, in the late 20th century, we found a new time machine. Not a machine to travel to the past, but one that could bring the past to us. We learned to read the most fundamental code of life itself, DNA. The quest to sequence Neanderthal DNA was a moonshot. DNA degrades over time, and finding enough intact fragments from 40,000-year-old bones seemed impossible. It was a painstaking process, a forensic investigation spanning decades. The goal was simple yet monumental: to sequence the entire genome of our closest evolutionary cousin, to look them in the eye, genetically, for the first time. The scientific world held its breath. What would we find? How different were they? The initial results were fascinating, confirming they were a separate species, a distinct branch on the human family tree. But then, the researchers did something revolutionary. They didn't just compare Neanderthal DNA to chimp DNA. They compared it to ours, to the DNA of modern humans from around the world. And the result was impossible. It shouldn't have been there, but it was. A clear, undeniable signal. Segments of Neanderthal DNA were sitting right there, in the modern human genome. The scientists checked, and rechecked, and checked again. There was no mistake. The finding was so shocking, so paradigm-shattering, that many in the scientific community refused to believe it at first. It meant one thing, and one thing only. Our ancestors didn't just meet Neanderthals. They didn't just fight them, or outcompete them. They mated with them. This wasn't a handful of people. This was widespread. The evidence was in the code. We had found the ghost. Not in a haunted castle, but in our own cells. This changed everything. The question was no longer what happened to the Neanderthals. The question became what happened between us and the Neanderthals. And more importantly, what did that ancient encounter leave behind inside of you and me? This discovery opened a door to a hidden chapter of human history, written not in stone, but in our own blood. And as we started to read this genetic manuscript, we began to discover that these ancient genes weren't just silent fossils. They were active, shaping our lives, our health, and our very bodies in ways we are only beginning to understand. The mystery of the Neanderthals had lain frozen in the earth for 40,000 years. The answers weren't in the grand landscapes anymore. They were here, in this sterile, silent room, in a piece of bone so small and fragile it could crumble to dust from a careless breath. This was the new frontier of the hunt. Not with shovels and brushes, but with pipettes and algorithms. The goal was audacious: to reach back across millennia and recover a message from the dead, to read the instruction manual of a vanished human. DNA is a resilient molecule, but time is its ultimate enemy. After death, it immediately begins to shatter, breaking into billions of tiny fragments. It gets contaminated by the DNA of every microbe, every fungus, every modern human who ever touched it. What's left after 40 millennia is less a book and more a box of confetti that's been through a shredder, left in the rain, and mixed with trash from 1,000 other books. The idea of piecing it together seemed not just difficult, but downright impossible. It was like trying to reconstruct the original Mona Lisa from a pile of ash. The hero of our story isn't a lone genius, but a technological revolution. The invention of next-generation sequencing. Imagine a machine that can take that box of genetic confetti and read the tiny letters on every single piece, all at once, millions and millions of times over. That was the key. That was the time machine. But reading the pieces was only half the battle. The next step was a computational nightmare. You had to take all those billions of random sequences and find where they fit. You needed a reference, a Rosetta Stone. And that Rosetta Stone was us. The intact, complete human genome. Scientists would use our DNA as a guide, a master map. They'd take these ancient, mysterious fragments and see if they matched anywhere on the human map. If they did, it was a clue. A piece of the Neanderthal genome found its home. This process was slow, expensive, and painstaking. It was a monumental act of digital archaeology. They were rebuilding a ghost, one digital bone at a time. The race was on. A few dedicated teams around the world were chasing this ghost, and leading the charge was a geneticist named Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. They had access to the most precious resource of all, untouched Neanderthal bones from Vindija Cave in Croatia, preserved in permafrost-like conditions. They were the best hope. The world held its breath, waiting for them to speak to the dead. And then, it happened. The first draft of the Neanderthal genome was assembled. The initial analysis was exactly what you'd expect. It confirmed they were a separate branch, a cousin species that had split from our own lineage hundreds of thousands of years ago. It was a massive achievement. But it was when they started doing the comparative analysis, when they began lining up the Neanderthal genome directly against genomes from modern people from all over the world, that the real shock came. The algorithm was looking for points of similarity. And it found them. But it found them where no one thought to look. The model was simple. If Neanderthals were a completely separate species that went extinct without interbreeding, then their DNA should be equally different from every modern human population on Earth. But that's not what the data showed. Not at all. The data showed something bizarre, something that made no sense. When they compared the Neanderthal genome to the genome of a modern individual from West Africa, the differences were significant. But when they compared it to the genome of an individual from Paris, or Beijing, or Papua New Guinea, the differences were smaller. There was a clear, undeniable, and statistically significant signal of similarity between Neanderthals and all modern humans, except for populations whose ancestors never left Africa. There was only one possible explanation for This was the explanation that broke a century of anthropological dogma. It meant that when the ancestors of modern Europeans and Asians Homo sapiens met Neanderthals on their journey out of Africa, they didn't just meet them, they didn't just fight them, they mixed, they had children together. Those hybrid children were raised in the Homo sapiens tribes, and they carried their mixed ancestry with them. They had kids of their own, and so on, for thousands of years, until that Neanderthal DNA was sprinkled, like a subtle spice, throughout the entire non-African world. The team was terrified. This was heresy. They checked for errors. They reran the data. They looked for any possible source of contamination. They had colleagues try to poke holes in it. The result held. It was real. The smoking gun wasn't in the soil, it was in the sequence. The ghost wasn't in the grave, it was in the living. This single finding didn't just add a chapter to human history. It ripped up the old textbook and wrote a completely new one. When they finally published the paper, it sent shockwaves through the world of science. The headlines were explosive. The implications were staggering. We had to completely rethink what it meant to be human. We weren't a pure species. We were, and always have been, a hybrid, a mosaic. But this discovery opened up 1,000 new questions. How much of them was in us? And what was that ancient DNA actually doing? Was it just junk, a silent fossil? Or was it active, shaping who we are today in ways we couldn't yet imagine? So, the next question was, how much of this ghost is inside you? The answer depends entirely on your ancestry. If your roots are entirely from sub-Saharan Africa, you likely have little to no Neanderthal DNA. Your ancestors simply never encountered them. But if you have ancestry from anywhere else in the world, Europe, Asia, the Americas, the Pacific Islands, you are almost certainly a carrier. On average, people of non-African descent carry between 1% and 2% Neanderthal DNA. Now, 2% might not sound like a lot, but think of it this way. Your genome is over 3 billion letters long. 2% of that is 60 million letters of genetic code. That's not a typo. That's entire chapters of a different story woven into your own. You are literally carrying fragments of a different kind of human inside you. And it's not a uniform package. You might have a Neanderthal gene for hair, thickness, while I have one for immune function. As a species, we've collectively recovered almost half of the entire Neanderthal genome from the fragments living inside billions of people. We are a walking, talking archaeological dig. But the story gets even stranger. This Neanderthal DNA isn't randomly scattered through our genome. It's found in specific places, and it's missing from others. This is incredibly revealing. It suggests that much of the Neanderthal DNA we initially inherited was actually bad for us. It was weeded out by natural selection. Their genes, evolved for a different kind of human in a different world, often caused problems when placed into our Homo sapiens biology, increasing the risk for certain diseases, maybe affecting fertility, was genetic incompatibility. But the pieces that stuck around, the pieces that were kept by natural selection and are still in us today, they tell a different story. They were gifts. They were advantages. They were things so useful, so vital for survival in the new Eurasian world, that our bodies held onto them for dear life. These weren't random fragments. They were a stolen arsenal, a care package of survival tricks from a species that had already spent 300,000 years learning how to survive in this harsh environment. So what were these incredible gifts? What did the Neanderthals give us that was so valuable we're still using it tens of thousands of years later? The answer is written in your body, your health, and your very vulnerabilities. The ghost isn't silent. It's whispering to your biology every single day. It's cold season. Someone sneezes on the bus and a cloud of viruses heads straight for you. What happens next? Your immune system launches into a complex defense that's been millions of years in the making. But here's the crazy part. Some of your best defenders aren't entirely yours. They're on loan from a species that's been extinct for 40,000 years. This is one of the most profound legacies of our ancient encounters. When our Homo sapiens ancestors migrated into new lands, they faced a terrifying new world of pathogens, viruses, bacteria, and parasites that their African immune systems had never seen before. They were vulnerable. But the Neanderthals and Denisovans had been living there for hundreds of thousands of years. Their immune systems were fine-tuned ancient experts at fighting off these exact Eurasian diseases. And through those ancient, intimate encounters, we stole their playbook. We acquired key immune system genes through interbreeding. It was the ultimate evolutionary hack. Instead of spending millennia slowly adapting and dying to these new diseases, we got a pre-made battle-tested upgrade overnight. In evolutionary terms, we gained a critical survival advantage. Scientists have pinpointed some of these stolen gifts. For example, certain Neanderthal versions of genes called HLA genes are very common in people of European and Asian descent. These genes are like the security guards of your cells, recognizing and flagging foreign invaders. The Neanderthal variants were specialized for the local threats. It was like getting a wanted poster for all the most dangerous criminals in the neighborhood. Other inherited genes helped turbocharge our inflammatory responsive bodies. SWAT team, making it faster and more aggressive at walling off infections. So the next time you fight off a cold, or your body wins a battle against an infection you never even knew you had, take a moment to thank your inner Neanderthal. Their DNA, woven into your genome, might be the very reason you won that fight. But this incredible gift came with a price. That same hypervigilant, aggressive immune system that was so good at fighting off plagues doesn't know when to quit, and in our modern, clean world, that can backfire spectacularly. The very genes that saved our ancestors from infection might be making us sick in a whole different way today. The same powerful Neanderthal upgraded immune system that was a lifesaver in a world of deadly pathogens has a dark side. In the absence of constant, real threats, it can get bored and confused. It can start to see enemies everywhere. In the food we eat, in the dust in our homes, in the pollen floating on the breeze. This is the tragic trade-off. Those valuable Neanderthal genes are strongly linked to a higher risk of developing a whole suite of autoimmune diseases, conditions where the body's defenses turn on itself. Lupus, Crohn's disease. Other genes influence how we metabolize fats, potentially increasing our risk for type 2 diabetes. It's a classic evolutionary bargain. A gene that is an advantage in one environment can become a liability in another. Think of it like this. We inherited a race car engine from the Neanderthals. It was perfect for the dangerous high-speed racetrack of the prehistoric world. But now we're driving that race car engine in Stepango city traffic. It overheats, it's inefficient, it breaks down. The engine isn't faulty. It's just mismatched to its modern environment. That's the paradox of the ghost in your genes. It's both a shield and a weapon pointed at yourself. And this legacy is written on our bodies in more obvious ways too. That thick, straight hair that doesn't frizz in the humidity. You can likely thank a Neanderthal gene variant. Your propensity to tan instead of burn under the sun. That could be another gift from your ancient cousin, an adaptation to weaker sunlight in northern latitudes. Even your chronotype, whether you're a night owl or an early bird, may be influenced by these ancient genetic fragments. They shaped our ancestors to survive in a specific world, and that shaping echoes in our biology today. But the story of genetic legacy isn't a solo, it's a chorus. And from the high mountains of Asia, another, even more mysterious voice joins the song. The Denisovans left us a genetic legacy that is, in some ways, even more spectacular and specialized. High in the thin air of the Tibetan Plateau, where oxygen is scarce, survival is a miracle. Most people who venture that high get debilitating altitude sickness. Their bodies can't cope. But for the Tibetan people, it's home. They thrive where others falter. And for the longest time, no one knew how. The answer, it turns out, wasn't evolved in Homo sapiens. It was borrowed. Secret is a supercharged gene called EPase-1. It's a master regulator of the body's response to oxygen. And the variant that allows Tibetans to live comfortably on the roof of the world didn't slowly evolve in humans. It was a direct gift from the Denisovans. It's one of the most stunning examples of adaptive introgression ever found. It's not a subtle influence. It's a key that unlocks an entire environment. Without that Denisovan gene, permanent settlement of the high Himalayas might have been impossible. This changes everything. We are not a pure lineage, we are a melting pot, a hybrid species. Our story isn't one of a single, triumphant ancestor replacing all others. It's a story of meeting, of mixing, of absorbing the strengths of every human we ever encountered. We are the sum of our cousins. The Neanderthals and Denisovans didn't just go extinct. In a very real genetic sense, they were absorbed. They became us. We are their living legacy. So the next time you look in the mirror, don't just see you. See the ghost. See the rugged Ice Age survivor in your immune system. See the high-altitude champion in your blood. See the echoes of 1,000 ancient loves and encounters that gifted you the very traits that allow you to live on this planet. You are not a singular being. You are a community, a walking testament to the fact that humanity's greatest strength has never been purity, but our ability to mix, to adapt, and to carry the best of our past forward into the future. The others are gone, but they are not forgotten. They live on in you.